Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Sherrone Moore, Michigan, two practices into that spring practice window, and you're kind of already starting to hear some buzz and some storylines emerge coming out of this Michigan program. Now, we're going to start this conversation off with what everybody wants to hear and talk about. That's the quarterback battle, including five-star quarterback Bryce Underwood. But yeah, I think what is flying under the radar for this Michigan team is there are a lot of position battles and a lot of other storylines that we're going to see unfold for Michigan during spring practice. Want to get into some early buzz, you might say, surrounding this Michigan team now before we do. And as always, the Michigan fans, appreciate you guys. Many of y'all know I'm a Michigan fan myself, and it's going to be really fun talking about this team during spring practice, not only because the quarterback position, but, Sherrone Moore talked about this morning in his press conference. This team is a lot deeper and has made a lot of offseason additions to this roster where you're going to see a lot of competition, a lot of position battles unfold across this Michigan roster, not only at the quarterback position. We're going to have a lot to talk about, and it's going to be some fun conversations over the next couple of weeks and months. Appreciate you guys. The Michigan fans have been showing a ton of love, ton of support, whether we're talking spring ball, whether we're talking the recruiting trail. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with what everybody wants to talk about. That is the quarterback battle. Now, there are two things of note. One, you're hearing already from spring ball that the ball just looks different coming out of Bryce Underwood's hands, which I don't think comes at a surprise to a lot of us Michigan fans. This is the most talented quarterback Michigan has signed in my history of being a Michigan football fan. We kind of expected it to look at a little bit different with Bryce Underwood. Here's the more intriguing storyline. And Sherrone Moore talked about this early in his spring press conferences. They're taking even reps at the quarterback spot. That is a little bit different than it normally looks like with a five-star quarterback coming in as an early enrollee where they normally start kind of at the bottom of the depth chart, have to work their way up through spring practice and fall camp. It sounds like it's a pretty even split. And I think that's encouraging for us Michigan fans in terms of getting Bryce Underwood out on the football field year one. Now, for all of us Michigan fans, whoever does win the quarterback job, we are going to be, fully getting behind. But I think a lot of us recognize that the ceiling for Michigan in 2025, if Michigan goes out, wins a Big Ten championship, wins a national championship, I think we all know who the quarterback one is going to be in the 2025 season. That's Bryce Underwood. Now, the second storyline that Sherrone Moore talked about was the wide receiver room is bigger. And I think that's encouraging for a couple of different reasons. Number one, we want more big bodies that can work vertically down the field. Donovan McCulley is all a 6'5". We talked about Jamar Broder yesterday. He's all a 6'5" as well. He's flashing early as an early enrollee true freshman. You got bigger size on the boundary, which is going to help Michigan pushing the ball vertically down the field more with Chip Lindsey and Bryce Underwood coming into this offense. Now, I think secondly, you look at Chip Lindsey. What does he like to do a lot? He likes to work the perimeter screen game. Having big bodies on the outside, that's going to be huge for Michigan as we look to incorporate some more screens. And as a just a casual football fan watching here, you probably want to see a decent amount of the screen game. Give Bryce Underwood some easy throws, let him get into a rhythm early in a lot of these football games. If you can run the screen game better than what Michigan did in 2024, that's going to be a massive asset in allowing Bryce Underwood to find a rhythm, not only early in the season, but early in some of these big games that Michigan will be playing in. Last year, you look at the screen game, which we went to a lot, but didn't execute very well. And you had a lot of small wide receivers trying to get it done on the perimeter blocking. Now you got Donovan McCulley. Now you got Kenny Bell. Now you got Jamar Broder. I mean, those are some big bodies that can get it done blocking on the perimeter. It's not always flashy to talk about wide receivers blocking on the perimeter, but with this Chip Lindsey offense that likes to incorporate the screen game, that's going to be encouraging as well. And then finally, just bigger catch radiuses. You don't have to be as perfect when you're working the middle of the field, when you're throwing to 6'5" Donovan McCulley, when you're throwing to 6'5" Jamar Broder. That's certainly going to help, especially with the young quarterback in Bryce Underwood. Number three, and this is probably where I want to dive into the most, and this is a bigger concern than I expected from Michigan fans, and that is the offensive line. Now, I understand the concern because we were pretty optimistic about the offensive line going into last year, and it did not live up to standards specifically early on in the year. Is the offensive line going to be good enough around Bryce Underwood, not only in pass protection, but also stimulating that run game? We ain't got no question marks about the 1-2 punch that Michigan has at the running back position. You're hearing phenomenal returns out of Justice Haynes, who just sounds like a pro's pro. I think Sherrone Moore noted he only eats one ingredient foods, like taking care of the body, taking care of, all the stuff off the field. Justice Haynes, Jordan Marshall. That's going to be a very dynamic running back room, but they're only going to go as far as the offensive line allows them to in the run game. Now, what is the offensive line going to look like? That's a question for a lot of us Michigan fans. Let's start with the new face. You return Evan Link, who I think is right now projected to start at left tackle. Giovanni Elhadi is going to move back to left guard, which shout out a few Michigan fans who are really dialed into this program. Y'all put that in the comment section. I kind of just thought he was going to stick at right guard like he played last year. Not the case. Sounds like Giovanni Elhadi is going to make the move. Greg Crippen at center. Nathan Afobe sounds like the leader in the clubhouse to take that other guard spot. And then Andrew Sprague. Now, the concern for me is, are we deep enough specifically at the offensive tackle position where you bring in Andrew Babaloa, and that's going to be a massive storyline to follow, not necessarily in terms of Andrew starting as a true freshman, but hey, can he be a serviceable depth piece for us going into 2025? Ty Haywood's coming in the summer. I think the intriguing one is Brady Norton. When Brady Norton came in small, he was listed at 275 pounds on the spring roster for Michigan. That to me is a little bit concerning, but it sounds like he's getting a look at tackle, and it looks pretty good. I mean, I think that's an intriguing and probably a positive development for this Michigan offensive line. How good is the unit going to be? My personal take, I'm probably more optimistic than most because, all right, Evan Link, yeah, it was bad early in 2024. I don't have to remind Michigan fans of that. We all talked about that for the month of September and October, but I thought towards the end of 2024 in the month of November, I thought you saw some massive development from Evan Link. And I think it's important to remind ourselves in this conversation that we're used to talking about this Michigan offensive line being, chock full of juniors, redshirt juniors, and seniors. It was a little bit different last year. Evan Link was a redshirt freshman. It was year 2 for him at the college football level. There's reason to believe that this kid gets better going into his third year of college football. And then Andrew Sprague on the other side. I think Andrew Sprague has the opportunity to be an absolute stud. We've talked about this, came in and started at right tackle against Alabama. Thought he looked more than solid for a true freshman getting his first career start. It's also important to remind ourselves that Andrew Sprague was not an early enrollee last year, was not in for winter workouts, was not in for spring practice, came in the summer. So he was only 6 months, less than 6 months within this Michigan program. And I thought he looked good. What does it look like with a full winter workout period and spring practice session for Andrew Sprague? I think we could be talking about a really good right tackle for Michigan in the 2025 season. I understand the concern because it underwhelmed last year. I'm cautiously optimistic. And if there's one thing I do trust Sherrone Moore to get done is, hey, we're going to build a really good offensive line. And you have a combination of guys who now have a lot of starting experience together. Talk about Greg Crippen, Giovanni Elhadi, Evan Link. But you also have some young guys, Jake Winnair or potentially Luke Hamilton, potentially Brady Norton, Andrew Babaloa that can push this unit as well, where you didn't really have that competitive depth in the 2024 year. We'll see what the offensive line looks like, but I think many of the Michigan fans are right where, it's one thing to talk about, hey, are we good enough on the outside for Bryce Underwood? I think the biggest storyline is, can we give Bryce Underwood not just a good run game? Can we give him an elite run game? And I think that the running backs are elite for Michigan. Now, is the offensive line going to be elite? I think that's a very fair question mark to have as we go through spring practice. Switching over to the defensive side of the football, Sherrone Moore kind of doubled down on this, and that is, TJ Guy and Derek Moore dudes, like straight up NFL guys. And I think a lot of people look at the loss of Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart, all of which will probably be top 100 picks in the NFL draft, and say Michigan lost a lot of star talent. Although that is true, Michigan still has a lot of star talent on this football team as well. Derek Moore, who led Michigan in quarterback hurries in the 2024 season. It wasn't Mason Graham. It wasn't Josiah Stewart. It was Derek Moore. Now, that's not a shot at a guy like Mason Graham. Mason Graham, like one of my all-time favorite Michigan football players, but it's more of just highlighting that do not sleep on Derek Moore being one of the better edge rushers, not only in the Big Ten, but in the country. And then TJ Guy just continues to get better as a football player. Like when TJ Guy committed to Michigan, I don't think anybody had the expectation that TJ Guy would emerge as one of the better pass rushers in the Big Ten. We kind of saw it in 2024, quite frankly, very much a possibility in 2025. Then the inside of the defensive line, hearing really good things about Rayshawn Benny, who, missed all of last year's offseason with an injury, coming back for one more year. You bring in Trey Williams, Damon Payne, have some young guys on the defensive line. You're hearing the things you want to hear, and we're deeper than we were last year, and Sherrone Moore noted that in the press conference. The other storyline, Jaishawn Barham will be a weapon, and he won't just be an off-ball linebacker. Sherrone Moore said he's going to play multiple spots, and I think all of the Michigan fans you kind of go to, can we get some sort of like Abdul Carter vibes from Jaishawn Barham? Look, I don't throw around the Abdul Carter comp a lot because Abdul Carter was a freaky dude, but I think Jaishawn Barham is kind of that type of freaky dude as well. And now it's year 2 with Wink Martindale. It's year 2 with Jaishawn Barham in this defense. Can we look to put him in more spots to maximize this kid's impact on this Michigan defense? Now, one, it's year 2 for Jaishawn Barham. That makes you feel better about him kind of getting utilized the best in the scheme. But I think secondly, the depth that you have at linebacker allows you to get creative with Jaishawn Barham. Where go back to last year, you probably weren't in a spot in the linebacker room from a depth standpoint where you could afford to move Jaishawn Barham around a lot. We weren't really sure what we had with Jimmy Rolder after redshirt. I mean, he played all right as a freshman in 2022, redshirted in 2023. Weren't really sure what you had with him. Obviously a guy like Cole Sullivan, who we're all excited about, was a true freshman. Now you have Ernest Hausman, kind of the leader of this Michigan defense, it sounds like, going into 2025. We know Jimmy Rolder can play. Cole Sullivan going into year 2. You're bringing Troy Bowles from Georgia. You're deeper at linebacker, which allows you to be more creative with Jaishawn Barham. We don't need Jaishawn Barham at linebacker like we did last year. Really excited to see what Jaishawn Barham can be. He really can allow Michigan to take the next step on the defensive side of the football. Michigan was damn good at defense last year. He's a guy that you're looking to replace all the disruption of a Mason Graham or a guy like Kenneth Grant. Jaishawn Barham at that second level, kicking him down, rushing the passer, that could be an X factor for this Michigan defense. In a very similar way, Abdul Carter took that Penn State defense from 2023 to 2024 to the next level. Can Jaishawn Barham be that guy for Michigan? Number 6, Shamari Earls will play early. He's going to be in the 2 deep. That's what you're hearing from Michigan. We were very confident when Shamari Earls committed to Michigan. We said immediately, this kid is ready to play at the college football level. He's 6'2", 200-plus pounds, 10-7 guy in the 100-meter dash. Now, why is that such a big storyline for Michigan? Well, it allows you to kind of get creative with this secondary, right? You look at Shamari Earls, hey, Zeke Berry might be best at nickel. So you could move Zeke Berry to that nickel spot. And whether it's Josiah Edmond, whether it's Shamari Earls, kick them into that starting cornerback spot. Basically, what it allows Michigan to do is potentially put Zeke Berry in a more advantageous position for himself as an athlete. Now, I think there's a long way to go to build your confidence in these boundary cornerbacks before you move Zeke Berry from boundary to nickel. But the emergence of Shamari Earls being ready to go as a freshman, I think is big for Michigan. Rod Moore not practicing yet, hopefully healthy by the summer. I saw some Michigan fans have some worries about Rod Moore, and I don't think they're misplaced. I mean, to me, I'm not too concerned about Rod Moore missing out on spring practice. This is a dude that's played a ton of football. There's not many safeties, if any, that understand the game better than Rod Moore. Now it's just about him physically getting back to where he was before the injury. If that happens before the 2025 year, I think you're going to be just fine with Rod Moore as safety. But at the same time, you're hearing good things from Mason Curtis and Brandon Hillman, like guys that can play for Michigan if Rod Moore is still working through an injury. You're hearing all the right things from Michigan. There are certainly some question marks on this roster that we hope we get answers to going into spring ball. We'll obviously watch the spring game, evaluate where this roster sits. And look, Sherrone Moore has shown us in his short tenure at Michigan, he is not afraid to go into the transfer portal and land legitimate difference makers at positions Michigan needs to address. We'll cut it there. We've a lot to update, a lot to talk about over the next couple of weeks and months. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.